How can we effectively resolve overcrowding in British prisons? Welcome along to Mark and Pete. Now, here's a thought.
Doing stir. Mummy bear, daddy bear, and baby bear went out into the forest to forage. They unpicked Goldilocks and stole her chair, and now they're all doing porridge.
Yes, that's the way it
Yes,
goes.
well, Britain is in crisis. Yes, the government has announced that emergency measures to deal with overcrowding in prisons in England and Wales is at an all-time high. Well, what is the solution? Many prisoners who have certain offences will have their sentences cut by 40%. And many people are concerned about this. Now, there are conditions for certain types of prisoners who've committed, for example, sex offences or many other serious crimes such as murder. But nevertheless, we certainly are at a crisis point where our prisons are bulging and there are not enough rooms and beds and services. Clergyman Pete, I ask you, what is an effective way of solving this problem in Britain today?
Well, I have a rather dramatic response to that, in that I really do think that the whole idea of using prison as punishment needs to be rethought. I'm taking my cue from the Bible. If you look at biblical prisons were effective what are sometimes called jails. That is where you are held until you're sentenced. They're not actually the punishment itself. The punishment itself was appropriate to the crime. For example, if you stole something, you had to pay back the amount that you stole twice. And if you couldn't afford to pay, then you had to work for the person that you'd stole from in order to, by your labor, pay it off. And that sort of principle held. And I think there's been attempts, well, not just I think, there have been attempts to do that with things like community service. But taking that and then amplifying it so that there is actually no prison is the way forward, because prison doesn't work. Prison in general tends to be like a breeding ground for more crime, and sometimes it's a university on how to do crime better. But it certainly doesn't fit people from coming back into society. Whereas if you work for the person who you stole from, or you have to pay back twice what you stole, you learn from your mistake. Everyone knows that you have been restored back into the society from which you came, and you can move forward. So that's my answer. It's a whole rethink of the whole system.
I agree. Dare I say, broken Britain.
You agree?
It has sadly reached a point where the status is criminal. Well, here's the point. Now, the Ministry of Justice data shows that the total England and Wales prison population is reaching an all-time high. Now, it said on the 12th of July of this year was 87,505, which is close to the record high of 88,000 back in 2011. But here's the point. Don't get too worried, folks, because the fact of the matter is that the capacity, that's the total number of people in prison, can only hold a certain amount now. And when it comes to things like control and security, it appears there are only about 1,450 places left. So that means that for those who are thinking of causing a crime, but here's the point, the backlog of crime is rising. And so there are many people who potentially could still go into the system. And this is the key, because at current rates, the prison population is projected to rise at about 19,000 by 2028. Now, that means that the capacity is set to rise by 9,000, because the point being here is there will be people going out of the system. But what the government is now looking to do is to effectively cut some of their sentences. Here's my take on what I think is a solution. So first of all, I think there's a problem. We can recognize that there haven't been enough prisons that have been should have been built. And it appears as though that what we should have done is built around 10,000 or possibly even increase them more than that over the last few years. But of course, the investment hasn't been there, the infrastructure hasn't been there, the will and appetite. But here's the thing: what is really deemed to be a prison offence, or one which allows somebody to go into prison? For example, there are people in prison at corporate crime. They may have stolen money, they may have caused unrest in the community. As bad as that is, they still go to prison. So first of all, I would address the first thing, which is policy. So this isn't about taking away punishment. If somebody commits a crime, they should still be punished. I think, Clergyman Pete, you mentioned that they should be either given more community service, or maybe that the fines are even higher than they currently are. Or possibly there are things where that they are asked to do certain types of duties. So, for example, maybe if they sort of are a perpetual individual who causes unrest in the community through violence or daubing paint everywhere or just causing mayhem in the community, they lack discipline. Maybe there's an opportunity where there's already a discipline service called the army. Get them all into the hobnail boots, and I'll tell you, they'll shape them up. Now, that may be something where effectively they're not mad, they're not going to be murdering anyone. So I do agree that a prison, for me, should be for those who are individuals who are completely unsafe for the general public. But that's not what is happening at the moment. What's happening is that people are going to prison for what are called minor offences. And this is where I think that the government now has a dilemma, because at the moment there are people who are in the system who now need to be taken out of the system. So again, it's not to take out murderers and rapists and things like that. It's people who perhaps are on the corporate side of it or the community side, where there has been discretion or unrest, or they need to be reassessed to say, should they now be going back into society? And here's the other thing as well. You've got to ask the question, why do people go to prison? Why have they committed the crime in the first place? So here's another point of solution, government. For the amount of investment that they put into having, more prisons, I don't think necessarily building more prisons is just creating more, room 101s to put your problems in. Now, what I would be more inclined to do is prevent the crime before it happens. Now, that has to be more community workers. That has to be people who go into schools, go into businesses, go into society to stop people actually causing crime and giving them outlets and investment. One of the reasons people are actually going into prison today, Clergyman Pete, is because they steal, because they can't pay for enough of their food or have enough money to go about their daily lives. And so therefore we've got to invest in those people to get them into jobs. So we need better job opportunities, we need better training to stop at that end. So to me, the point is we need new policies on who goes to prison. How do we invest in communities to stop the crimes happening? And here's the other one, which is probably going to be the controversial one. A high percentage of people who are in prison today were never born in Britain. They are coming from foreign lands. So the question is, should we now be sending them back, which I know is not an easy thing, but we need to have some agreements with some of the countries now in terms of where do we send them? Because at the moment, yes, folks, the taxpayers are paying for them to be here.
Yes, it's a difficult proposition sending people back to countries where they supposedly came from. It could be denied politically. Physically, it's very simple. You just get a plane and take them there. So it's a question of political will. And I think that is right. There needs to be a process, but that needs to be adjudicated by a court in the country.
And it's going to take time.
Well, yes, but the first step is to leave the remit of the European Court of Human Rights. We have to be out from under the aegis of that court. That really was a part of the remit for Brexit, and yet it was never enacted. So that needs to be done. I don't see any likelihood of it happening. What I'm saying is That's what needs to be done. It may not happen, but yeah, the other points you allude to are absolutely right. I mean, what my where I normally come in is at the point of, there are 2 points actually, either of people being in so desperate states they're going to commit crimes in order just to live a normal life, or they're too poor, or they're just too psychologically disturbed. For viewers that don't know, I work as a vicar in 3 churches in the northwest of England, and I and my team of pastoral workers do deal with quite a lot of that issue, but also people coming out of prison and trying to get back into society. Almost impossible. It's just, once you've been in for a reasonable amount of time, a year or more, you become institutionalized to the prison, and it's difficult to get back in. Prison makes things worse for society.
I'm going to say also,
because it takes people out of society.
Add to that, is that on corporate side of the world, so from a business perspective, this also blights or blots the person's record, because when it comes to trying to get a job, there have been many people, and I saw recently in the BBC's Question Time on this subject, a gentleman admitted that he couldn't really come to terms with the integration of society, but more importantly, when he had been released, couldn't get a job because companies just didn't want anybody with a criminal record. And this is the problem. It's not to say that you shouldn't be punished for your crime if you've been stealing bread or milk or from a local store. That is not good. Do not do it, folks. However, if that means that you're a perpetual criminal on that level, you could go to prison under the current policy. But once you start going into that world, the consequence isn't just, as Clergyman Pete said, is that you're now starting to be exposed to, should we say, unsavory and unwelcoming experiences. And the fact of the matter is that you're coming out not best placed, whereas that's also going to mean that you could have challenges trying to get a job to be reintegrated into society. So that to me is a big concern. But here's the other one. Here's another stat, and it's only one region, but I thought it really sort of summed up the problem. Now, His Majesty's prison services in Wells in Northamptonshire have identified that the jails have been operating at 99% capacity since the start of last year, and they're now weeks away from running out of the space. So basically, if you take all of these typical regions, they're all at near capacity. In some cases, they're actually over capacity. They're having to cram more people in, and that is just not sustainable. Even the prison warders are finding it very, very difficult to maintain safety and security, not just for themselves, but of course for other prisoners. So something has to be done, and it has to be done very quickly. Yes, what do you think in terms of the other preventive measures? Do you think that maybe the church has an opportunity here to help people?
Here is what has been for some time an unpopular position to take, and that is the church needs to take the position that certain things are immoral and wrong, and you need to turn away from them, stop doing them, live according to God's laws, which are, a lot of the British laws are based on God's laws, and some are uncontroversial. Let me take one. Do not murder, do not steal. That's 2. I can't count. But, there are certain principles in Christianity which have been adopted in British law, and if the church was just more forthright in teaching them, rather than cowardly backtracking and trying to fit in with whatever the current cultural trends are, then the church would be in a better position. And by the church, I mean the Church of England that I'm a part of, but also the Roman Catholic Church and other churches, and my friends in the Baptist Church. And elements of the Baptist Church have gone just wickedly liberal and give way to this thing. Look, We don't want people being criminals. Let's, at a heart level, change people to think that to think and have it as part of their absolute core being. They cannot do things like that.
Yep.
And the reason that many people do not steal is because they just know in their core of their being that it's wrong. And for all the sort of panoply of laws, if people believe that, then you just reduce a lot of the crime rate. It's not necessarily to do with being poor. It's to do with your moral values.
Indeed. I agree. Well, I wonder what our public think. I mean, our listeners, are pretty adept at coming up with ideas.
Well,
so
I think we have some quite aggressively opinionated people on Twitter or X, and of course, we love to hear from you. And other ways of getting in contact, you can go to markandpete.com and leave a comment on this and any episode. We love to hear from you. But I guess from Mark and myself, it's good. That's it for this week, and goodbye for now. Catch you next time.